Hi, Jordan. How's it going?
Oh, it's doing all right. How about you?
Not too bad, not too bad. First of all, I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and chat today. And of course, I wanted to start off by asking how you are doing in the midst of this coronavirus craziness and where you are currently. Are you still in LA? Did you go away for a bit? How's that
Yeah,
going?
yeah. I actually, I'm in the Philadelphia area. I came east to. I have a string quartet that I wrote that was going to be premiered in New York in the middle of March, and I came east just before everything got canceled, and then I've been staying here. I'm lucky to be at my family's house where I actually grew up. I'm sitting at the piano that I grew up at. So
Oh, that's so
uh,
nice. That's
yeah.
great.
So
Well,
certainly making lemonade out of the situation.
no kidding. And does it seem very crazy out there in Pennsylvania, or everybody's just kind of staying put and it's
We're lucky to be in a relatively small, idyllic suburb outside the
nice?
city, so things are pretty nice here. But it's pretty crazy everywhere. I'm just sort of thankful that as a teacher, I can continue to work even if it's online. And so busy teaching classes and trying to keep up with my students, and also trying to be creative too, trying to keep some composition projects brewing. So.
Nice, nice. Well, just diving right in, as you know, we have some Colburn students participating in Eric Whitacre's newest virtual choir project. And we thought it would be interesting to talk to you from your perspective as a composer, as well as a professor of music theory and aural skills at Colburn. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background, and maybe specifically about your compositions as well?
Sure, I'd love to. Thanks. Yeah, I grew up as a composer and performer, sort of integrated, and I still consider that to be really important, as informs my music and inspires my collaborations. And I also have a decent number of years as a singer in my background. I did my graduate degrees at USC, and I was lucky enough while I was there to sing in USC Chamber Singers, and including getting to collaborate with Eric Whitacre on a couple occasions. So it's sort of as I said, sort of an integrated aspect of who I am as a musician. And my compositions are very much, I think, related to this idea of collaboration. I really like to write for specific people, specific directors. I love to work with specific poets, either poets who I've had the opportunity to literally work with in person, or poets who I can at least exchange words with via electronic means. But yeah, and I write for a large variety of different kinds of instrumentations and scenarios. But really, I love writing for the voice. It's an incredible medium.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, I was actually doing some studying up on your background through your website and everything, and I had a feeling that you were a pianist and vocalist, so thank you for confirming that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, besides your own background as a singer, what draws you specifically to the voice as a medium, and what has your experience been like in writing for other singers, working with other singers? What is that process like?
Yeah, I mean that's been a long process. I think I've always just found the voice to be really magical. There's something, and there's something that is deeply inspiring and emotional for me just to see a human being sing. It doesn't even have to be about the words that they're saying, or particularly the notes that they're creating. It's just something kind of amazing that the human body is able to produce such a wide array of sounds. And that it all goes on internally. You don't really see much. You can see a little bit with the lips, but as any singer will tell you, there's a huge amount that goes on behind the lips. And yeah, I mean, I've gotten a chance to write for choral ensembles and for solo singers for most of my compositional experience, and it's every time it's a learning experience. Whether it's about realizing that, a young composer version of this was realizing that not every soprano is the same soprano. So different notes will sound different, and different. I think one of the things that I've really tried to run with as a composer is that there are different things that are really exciting to particular singers. And so one of the first questions I often have for a singer or for a director is, what does your instrument want to do? What do you think would be a really enthralling musical experience for you? Because that's my sense of how to get the best result.
Yeah, absolutely. That completely makes sense. And in your experience with working with singers, what do you find is compositionally unique about writing for the voice? Because I know you also write for instrumental and electroacoustic, I believe, electronic music.
Yep.
So what's unique about the voice?
Yeah, well, as I said, I think there's something unique about it just as a experience for the audience, that there is this element of you can't see necessarily how the singer is doing what they're doing, and that's in fact something that I think many singers spend many years of technique working on. So you can, they can be sort of lying in any position on the ground, or they can be doing these sort of magnificent feats of muscular work, but looking like they're doing nothing.
Right.
And I think one of the things that I find really kind of unique about writing for the voice is this interesting kind of interplay between muscle memory, which is obviously an important part about how a singer learns to perform a piece, but also how do you engage with the natural ear. And singers, I find, are really, as a singer myself, I know that I was often challenged by music where I had to work really hard to figure out how I would sing it or how I would hear my notes in relationship to everybody else. But that's also, to me, part of the compositional responsibility, is finding a way to write music in such a way that even if it's not directly clued in to what note the singer is going to come in on, or how does my note relate to the person next to me, that there's still some sense of musical logic that you can even build into the piece, which is one of the things that I really think is kind of fascinating, is how do you get some really complex sounds that you can kind of lead the singer into discovering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the way that you describe that journey of the musical sound when writing for voice. And I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit how text informs the way that you write for the voice. You had mentioned talking with poets and working with them. How does that process work?
Yeah, well, that's a great segue in my mind, because one of the other things that I think is really wonderful about writing for the voice and kind of unique, and I talk about this with my composition students a lot, is that vowel for a singer is this amazing extra parameter that is sort of the vocal equivalent of timbre in an orchestra, of changing the instrument. So just a simple result of having a singer change on the same pitch from an oo vowel to an o vowel to an ah vowel is sort of, to me, like going from a muted cello to a clarinet low in its range to a trumpet high in its range. I mean, again, the same exact pitch. It just, we have this wonderful array of timbral results with vowel. So in terms of the poetry that I like to use, one of the first questions that I ask myself is, what are the sounds? I mean, I read the poems out loud. It's really important to me to hear the sounds, not just the vowels, but also the consonants, because of course they provide a sense of percussive elements that can be used often to create texture. You can sort of dissect words and use little sounds in the words to create sort of sonic texture on which a sailing melody can sort of sit. So I love scrutinizing poetry for the sounds of the words. And then I think one of the things that, especially in the last several projects I've done with voice, one of the things that's really stuck out to me with the poetry I choose is a sense of not necessarily form in the sort of capital F term of form, but internal relationships in the poem. If there's repeated words or repeated phrases, or even a more conventional structure like multiple stanzas where each stanza ends with the same line. These kinds of formal elements of the poetry can really inspire music in my mind, and I love believing that it's still an exchange. So I've often had a hard time setting a poem that is super strict in its form because I don't have then my freedom to play. But if there's something that is kind of inspiring, again, I think of like a repeated word as often one of the first things that I notice. What does that repetition then suggest to me in terms of the musical structure that I can play with? So yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. That's really a really cool thing to hear. Finally, I want to bring us back to this virtual choir performance. And my last question has to do with composing for a large choral ensemble. What are some things that you take into consideration when you're writing for a large choir? And in this case, potentially thousands of voices might be participating. And also specifically related to this project, would you take any special considerations knowing that the work would be premiered virtually?
Yeah, well, you know, the one of the amazing things about a large ensemble of any size of musicians is that allows you to have a lot of flexibility and sort of play from the composer side with subsets, whether it's individual specific solos or kind of an overall unveiling of the ensemble, or sort of changes in the shape of the music related to smaller subsets of the group. You know, with a sort of a choir of 1,000 that is amplified like wild, and it's certainly I think one of the things that would be most exciting to me is that I would get to obviously have a moment where I have everybody singing at the top of their range with full energy, should the text suit it. But then to sort of think of a journey within the piece where that is contrasted with elements of at least a change in that kind of hierarchy of the full ensemble, perhaps playing around not just with people not singing, but with people doing very quiet things that allow, I mean, there's something really powerful about a large number of people being really quiet. And I think that's actually one of the things that I would think would be an interesting challenge about a virtual choir, a virtual performance, is that as I think we've all experienced, being in a concert hall for a really soft moment in a piece has a very different sonic result than hearing it even over the best speakers, over the best headphones. And some of the sort of magic and drama that I would aim for perhaps in a concert hall, I'd have to then, I think about how that would translate, or how I could best accomplish that over electronic means. And you know, similarly, I think one of the another challenge that I can just specifically cite, because I've been interested in this in my music for the last couple of years, is spatialization of sound, which again, with a choir of, I mean, even 100 people, let alone 1,000 in one room, there's this amazing opportunity to play with where does the sound come from. And unless your audience is listening to a virtual performance over surround sound, incredible speakers, it's going to be harder to accomplish that. So I think it means that there's elements then to embrace even further about just the opportunity of human communication, of text, of sound, of melodic structure, because all those elements, in addition to the words, really, I think, can be these essential ways to communicate. And of course, one of the great advantages that is worth mentioning about a virtual choir is the accessibility, you know, the ability for people all over to be able to not only listen, but also participate. And I think that's something that should be celebrated, absolutely. I mean, I'm a person as a composer, but also as a teacher, who wants as many people to be able to make music as possible. That's such an exciting opportunity of a virtual choir of 1,000 or more.
Yeah, for sure, especially in this time, right, where everybody's sequestered and quarantined, and you can't go out and enjoy the concert halls like we could, you know, 2 months ago. So yeah,
and it might be a challenge for a little while to try to find ways that can happen. So I know I've been talking with a lot of my collaborators and my friends and my colleagues about how do we make music, how do we find ways to continue to make music and collaborate with these new mediums, and of course, you know, performing at home is both a possibility and a reality. So we need to embrace it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you again so much for taking the time to sit down and chat with me. For those of you watching at home, thanks for joining us today. I know all of us who are involved in this virtual choir project are very excited to see the end result of the performance, and we do hope you'll tune in and be with us for that. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.